Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to everyone to this CFS 47 side event, Transforming Agricultural Innovation for People, Nature and Climate, organized by CGIAR, the governments of the UK and Thailand with partners IFAD and WWF. I'm Kainayo Felix Nwanze, CGIAR Special Representative to the UN Food Systems Summit. And today I'm here as your chairman and moderator. Let's kick off with some introductory remarks to set the scene for today's event. This will be followed by two remarks or statements, and then a panel discussion by four distinguished panelists. We have set aside a 20-minute live Q&A session after the panel discussion, and I'd like to invite our audience to submit their questions via the Q&A box. We'll close with a statement from the CGIAR, and I'll leave the names of our speakers and panelists to later. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is today much more alert to the intertwined challenges of food security, environmental sustainability, and climate crisis. And increasingly, there is heightened recognition that innovation will be a crucial element of the 21st century solutions that we need to address this alarming situation. We see this awareness in the UK's commitment to supporting agricultural research and climate adaptation, from support for CGIAR to efforts to raise ambition and catalyze action on climate change through the COP26 presidency. In Thailand, a country prone to devastating climate events, efforts by governments to prioritize adaptation technologies and knowledge transfer in its agricultural strategic plan on climate change is one that is critical for a country where almost half of the labor force works in agriculture. Business as usual will not get us there. And to achieve transformation across food, land, and water systems, we must first drive transformation across research and innovation systems. And for me, I see three fundamental areas: through increased investment, improved coordination, and more strategic and meaningful partnerships. Only by working together across disciplines and sectors, breaking down silos, we will find solutions that address these triple threats. Only by working together with smallholder producers, farmers, fishers, pastoralists, and livestock keepers will we develop innovations that respond to end users' needs. And only by working together at all levels, regional, national, and international, will we be able to bring these innovations to scale. CGIAR is responding to this need in two ways: through its own transformation to a more integrated one CGIAR, and with a new 2030 research innovation strategy that takes a systems and partnership focused approach. This new strategy builds on a track record of working closely with partners like the UK and Thailand for more than 50 years to deliver innovations that have changed the world. Just to mention a few: developing climate-smart rice and maize varieties, pioneering the creation of climate-smart villages and valleys, developing drought monitoring and flood forecasting systems, and using artificial intelligence to develop apps to identify crop pests. As we look ahead to the United Nations Food Systems Summit in September and COP26 in November, CGIAR is proud to be part of a new campaign with UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, that aims to unlock investments for sustainable agriculture around the world. This campaign, Transforming Agricultural Innovation for People, Nature, and Climate, calls for funding, partnerships, knowledge sharing, and international synergies to support smallholders' livelihoods, climate resilience, and nutrition while delivering nature-positive outcomes. With that, it is now my pleasure to invite the first of our two speakers, my friend Maria Helena Semedo, FAO's Deputy Director General. Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Kanayo, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. My dear friend Kanayo, my sister Kundavi, colleagues, panelists, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to join Kanayo in welcoming you to this CFS side event. The world faces unprecedented challenge that undermine global food security and nutrition, the sustainability of our agri-food systems, and the health of our ecosystems. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and now the COVID-19 pandemic have put us at a tipping point, and we risk the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. It is time to rethink how we produce, process, and consume our food. Hunger is on the rise, and the FAO estimates that the COVID-19 pandemic may add up to 132 million more people to the ranks of the already 690 million hungry in the world. As always, the small-scale family farmers are the most affected, vulnerable, and most dependent on ecosystem services that nature delivers, estimated on more than $125 trillion. It is essential that we take bold and transformative action to build back better. To prevent future pandemics, we need to seriously revisit our relationship with nature and have a global, science-based, and holistic approach to promote human-animal ecosystem interface and reduce the risk to threats. As it has been said, the upcoming UN Food System Summit, the UNFCCC COP26, UNCCD COP15, and CBD COP15, where a post-2020 global biodiversity framework will be adopted, can catalyze and accelerate nature-based solutions for sustainable development and make our agri-food systems more inclusive, resilient, sustainable, and innovative. The COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with the harsh effects of climate change and biodiversity loss, have given impetus to innovation and push to transformative changes of our agri-food systems to the center of international and national policy agendas like never before. But innovation is not only about the latest technology. It is about the social, economic, institutional, and organization and policy processes that impact the lives and livelihoods of family farmers. Over the last years, FAO has promoted innovative practices and approaches like agroecology, sustainable intensification, and climate-smart agriculture. To make innovation accessible to farmers, fisheries, and forests, and accelerate agriculture transformation, we must promote new business models. It has been said that business as usual is no longer the solution, such as FAO country-led hand-in-hand initiative. It also includes a geospatial platform, a climate hub, with real-time big data that provides access to agriculture, environment, and climate information to enhance decision-making. Our Green Cities initiatives offer innovative nature solutions to boost agri-food systems in urban and peri-urban areas, contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation, and generate jobs to address the economic problems aggravated by the pandemic. The UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021-2030, co-led by FAO and UNEP, provides a renewed opportunity to restore degraded seascapes and landscapes and increase production, jobs, and livelihoods. FAO is setting the international platform for digital food and agriculture to facilitate the use of artificial intelligence to improve pest control and crop genetics, as well as tools allowing optimized management of natural resources and early warning of food security threats. Coupled with strategic partnership, private sector engagement, investments, science, data, technology, and forward-looking policies, agriculture innovation can be the driving force to transform our food systems for climate, nature, and people, and empower farmers and communities. Dear colleagues, friends, we are the ancestors of future generations. We need to leave a strong, viable, and sustainable legacy. And I thank you for your attention. Kanayo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maria Helena. This is excellent. You actually set the stage for going forward to our next speaker. It's my pleasure to invite our next speaker, Rachel Glenister, Chief Economist, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom, FCDO. Rachel, over to you.
Thanks very much, Kanayo. It's really great to be part of this conversation. Agriculture is at the center of three of the world's biggest challenges: poverty, climate change, and biodiversity loss. And innovation and research in agriculture really offer us the hope for change to deliver on nutrition and income for the poor, whilst restoring biodiversity, combating and protecting people from climate change. So we've got these three key issues that we're talking about together here, and they really intersect in the area of agriculture. Now, the challenge seems both simple, but also overwhelming. Agriculture makes up 26% of greenhouse gas emissions, uses 70% of fresh water, and is responsible for 78% of the pollution of water in the world. It's also the main threat to biodiversity. And yet biodiversity is absolutely essential for effective agriculture. It underpins all food production and builds resilience into the agricultural system. And we can't do without agriculture. We need it to feed and clothe us. So while it's doing this damage, it's absolutely essential. It's also particularly important, agriculture is particularly important for the poor. So while 28% of the workforce worldwide work in agriculture, 65% of the poor work in agriculture. And not only is agriculture causing a threat to climate change, but climate change is causing a threat to agriculture. Nature's amazingly adaptive, and farmers are incredibly adaptive to different conditions, but they simply can't cope with the rate of change that we're enforcing on the world through our climate change. So the fact that agriculture is at the heart of these three interconnecting problems is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, because if we get agriculture right, we can really help fix these three critical problems. So how do we respond? Well, I think we do two things. We have to get policy right. We need to get incentives right. I'm an economist, you would expect me to say that. But we also need innovation. So on policy, public policies to support agriculture have been designed to promote short-run food production. And they've been quite successful in doing that, but they've also caused a lot of the challenges that we've just been talking about. Overuse of land and soil, we subsidize water and the energy to pump it, and so we're getting less and less fresh water. And the Dasgupta review, commissioned by the UK government recently, highlighted that destructive farming subsidies cause damage costing, $4 to $6 trillion a year. So we need to change how we reward farmers and farming communities. We need to get the price of inputs right, and we need to pay farmers and reward farmers for doing practices that help the environment rather than hurt it. But I mainly want to talk about innovation today. Our agricultural systems draw on hundreds, no thousands of years of wisdom about what crops to grow, when and where and how to plant. But when climate change comes so rapidly and so drastically, that wisdom becomes obsolete really quickly, and farmers have to change what they do and adapt much faster. We've had great success in developing and disseminating new crop varieties over decades that are more resilient, more nutritious, more productive, and this has really lifted millions of people out of poverty. But we don't have decades for change anymore. We have a few years, and we have to keep changing the crops that farmers grow in response to the changing climate. We've got some really encouraging examples of doing that. Kanaya mentioned a couple of them, but investment in climate resilient crops has delivered more food availability and reduced the prices of food for the poor. Have drought tolerant maize has outperformed commercial varieties in El Nino years in Africa and South Asia, and lifted millions of farmers, helped millions of farmers cope with drought and floods. It's important that flood tolerant rice, for example, is particularly beneficial for the poor. Because it's the most marginalized who live in flood prone areas. In Ethiopia in 2017, high yielding and disease resilient varieties of wheat have been adapted at scale, covering more than 60% of the farming area. We've had adaptations that help address malnutrition and promote economic growth. My own work in Sierra Leone found that high yielding crop rice varieties led to lower malnutrition, and we know that lower malnutrition has important benefits and productivity later in life. So we've seen sort of really impressive returns to innovation. We've also had innovation that helps us monitor and reward farmers for best practices. So for example, we can now reward farmers who don't cut down trees by monitoring at a satellite level what's happening to tree cover. In our role as COP26 presidents, we in the UK aim to catalyze action in this critical nexus of climate, agriculture, and nature. We're doing that in part through the Just Rural Transition Initiative, which brings together governments, farmers, businesses, and local communities and Indigenous people to lead a shift towards sustainable agriculture and food systems. We're also doing this through promotion of innovation and better evidence on what works and what are the most cost-effective interventions to produce the change that we need to see. And there's huge gaps in the evidence that we need to respond. So while investments in the CG system have seen massive returns, so we've seen investment about 60 billion in present net value terms in the last 5 decades, but it's returned tenfold benefits So, really high return to this investment in innovation in the CG system. But we still see a relatively small amount of innovation, particularly in agriculture for low and middle income countries. Now, national governments are the main contributors to this investment in innovation. Private sector is about a quarter of it. Bilaterals and multilaterals like FCDO are relatively small, but I think are really important in making sure that agriculture sees innovation for low-income countries. Because we left this simply to the private sector, they would focus primarily on richer countries. So I encourage others to join us in supporting that critical innovation in agriculture for low-income countries. So I want to talk a little bit about the work we're doing on transforming agriculture innovation for people, nature and climate campaign, which was launched last month at the Climate Adaptation Summit. The idea is to foster a step change in the scale and pace of agricultural innovation, being able to meet future demands for food. We need research and innovation to deliver practical solutions which can help poor farmers adapt to climate change while protecting nature and biodiversity. And this is going to be a key part of our adaptation and resilience campaign as part of COP. We also need to figure out, we need innovations that take innovations to scale. So we need to understand where, when and how farmers take up innovations and what we can do to encourage that taking to scale. We need to target investments on the biggest challenges for climate resilient agriculture. We need to involve stakeholders from the start and focus on development and scaling. There's a lot of innovation that takes something from the bench science to farmers actually being able to use it. In Ethiopia, for example, we're using technology to strengthen digital extension channels such as video and IVR, developing a digital infrastructure for agricultural advisory platform, and catalyzing an ecosystem of public, private, and civil society actors to contribute to use digital agricultural advisory services. We've also put a lot of effort in trying to understand the evidence base, but see a real gap in the evidence on this intersection of agriculture, climate change, and ecology. So we did a review of the evidence recently, and out of 35,000 papers on agroeconomical approaches, only 115 looked at climate change outcomes, and only 48 of those tested climate change outcomes, agroecological approaches that had climate change outcomes and tested at scale. So out of all that literature, very little on what we need to be focusing on now. That review notes that agroecological approaches can support climate change adaptation capacity with value for the role of co-creation and sharing knowledge between all of these stakeholders we've been talking about. Large evidence base indicates that we see particularly low adoption of some of these technologies in sub-Saharan Africa. That's partly because it's not profitable for farmers to adopt some of these technologies. And so we really need mechanisms to overcome the constraints that these farmers face to adopting best practices that will help preserve the environment. It's really important when we do innovation that we take the farmers and their needs into account. So I look forward to the discussion from the panelists about how we can solve these difficult challenges and scale innovation that responds to the needs of farmers, but also to the needs of our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you for this keynote on transforming agricultural innovation systems. Well, I cannot resist emphasizing a couple of things that you said, because these are things that we oftentimes overlook. Agriculture is indispensable for our livelihoods, yes, but it is a threat to climate. And on the other hand, climate change is a threat to agriculture. So we need to strike a balance here. But also, you earlier on, you did emphasize policy, because the policy dimension oftentimes, I think, is what is well, not just missing, it's not emphasized enough. But more importantly, you spoke about policy that is fit for purpose in many societies, farmers and their ecosystems and ecologists. Thank you so much for that very insightful keynote. Ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to go to kind of a mini session of this session, which brings us to a panel discussion. I'm very pleased to present to you 4 panelists who are going to set the stage for the session that will follow, which is a Q&A. Please, for those of you who already have questions, either post them on the Q&A box. We have colleagues who will respond directly to you. Otherwise, they will bring them forward when we have the Q&A session. 4 panelists. First, I have Joe Campari, who is Chair, Action Track 3, Boost Nature Positive Production at Scale, United Nations Food System Summit. He's also leader of Food Practice World Wildlife Fund, WWF. We also have Josna Puri, Director, Environment, Climate, Gender, Youth, Nutrition, and Social Inclusion of IFAD. Also, on the screen already, you can this is Thanawat Tiensin, who is a permanent representative of Thailand to the FAO, IFAD, and WFP. He's based in Rome, of course. And finally, we have my old good friend, Ismail Sunga, who is CEO, Southern African Confederation of African Union, SACAO. My pleasure to see all 4 of you. I'm going to start my first question, address my first question to Joe. And please, the panelists, remember you have just 2 minutes. And you have a second round of 2 minutes and a third round of 1 minute to round up. So you have 5 minutes. Now we're going to split into 3 parts. My first question, Joe, we have heard from racial and agroecological practices and the linkages between agriculture and biodiversity. I think that was very eloquently put together. You are chairing the action track on boosting nature positive production at scale for the Food System Summit. How do you envisage this evidence informing your work? 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Kanayo. Delighted to be here, everyone. You know, I always like to remind ourselves of the urgency of the issues that we're talking about. We have 9 harvests, the last 9 harvests ahead of us to deliver the SDGs, right? And it's good to see the evidence and recognize the evidence gaps on the critical issues of agroecology and biodiversity. We consider both these topics to be crucial for the design of nature-positive food production systems, and therefore for the success of the action track that I'm chairing, Action Track 3, and the Food System Summit itself. We have developed for Action Track 3 a discussion paper which includes the proposition of 10 elements for the design of nature-positive food production systems. These 10 elements, ranging from diversity and resilience to co-creation and sharing of knowledge, are in essence the propositions of agroecology, which are crucial for scaling up nature-positive food production. In my view, as Rachel very eloquently discussed, we're not missing the evidence on the benefits of agroecological practices, but we are missing the evidence on how to leverage them and scale them. As Rachel well noted in her remarks, based on the study conducted as part of this campaign, while there is substantial evidence favoring agroecological approaches, 35,000 papers and more, scientific papers, only a small proportion provides evidence for climate change outcomes, 115 papers. And even a smaller proportion provides evidence for approaches at scale, 48 papers. So the question is, where is the evidence on scaling approaches that actually work? To reach scale, we at WWF believe that we need to take a landscapes approach. And we are now producing a primer on agroecology and resilient landscapes, where we seek to answer some of these questions. We hope this paper will be useful to inform the debate and the summit process. Also, Action Track 3 is working full steam to develop what we call game-changing solutions, one of which is on agroecological principles and practices. There is a team working on that in our Action Track. And I just want to put the context that whatever we produce and everything that we produce, every study, every solution in Action Track 3 needs to be very carefully handled, or we need to hand carry these solutions to COP26 and the CBD in particular to make our summit and our action track meaningful in the context of people and nature. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Jay, you're muted.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. I'm going to, thanks a lot, Joe. I'm going to move on to just now. From what we've just heard, if we are to deliver end-to-end solutions, this requires a close partnership with other stakeholders, including development finance institutions such as IFAD. What do you need from the research community to partner more effectively?
Thank you very much, and please feel free to call me Joe, although it might be a bit confusing with Joe.
Well, exactly. That's why I called you. Exactly. Okay, I'll call you Joe number 2.
That's good. That's good. Thank you very much. So as you know, IFAD really works in terms of its niche segment. It works with smallholder farmers. And we know that farms that are under 2 hectares in size produce about 1/3 of the total crop production globally and 1/3 of the total food supply. And basically what is, 24% of the overall gross agricultural area overall. Given all of this, there are 3 challenges essentially that I'm throwing to the research community. And again, just by way of background, I worked both on the research side and now I'm on the operational side and the implementation side. So for my bread and butter in my previous incarnations, I worked with evidence reviews a lot, and I know Rachel's work. And I think there are 3 things that that I'd like to ask the research community to help us with. First, I think we're recognizing to a large extent about what works on the ground, right? So we know that yes, precision agriculture works. We know that yes, we have to deliver good nutrition. We know that cash transfers work, etc. But I think the key challenge for the research community is how do we deliver that successfully? So I think the what is well known, but I think the how to deliver and how to implement that is really key. And I think this is really the challenge for the research community. If they want to be also relevant and useful for the implementers and the deliverers on the ground, we've got to work far more closely to understand what are those incentives that will go the last mile for farmers. So just as an example, we know agricultural insurance is good for farmers. Even if it is actuarially fair, farmers tend to, in targeted communities, the adoption rate of agricultural insurance is 18 to 25%. That's a really good adoption rate in, if you go and speak to agricultural insurance. That's just not good enough. So we've got to understand better as to what the concerns are and try and deal with those last mile problems. And that's really about implementation research and thinking about last mile problems. That's one. The second, my co-authors and I just finished an evidence review on adaptation and resilience and trying to find out also in one evidence review what can work. We looked at the literature and the evidence, high quality evidence, and then another one in results-based payment.
Thank you, Joe. Was that it?
Just my last comment on that.
Okay.
Okay, my last comment, we found essentially that we don't know how institutions can deliver well. And the Partha Das Gupta review says this as well, that there has been a collective institutional failure. It's not a market failure that we've not been able to deliver well. institutions, we need to know what works for them. And evidence reviews show this over and over again, that we do not know enough about what makes institutions work well and deliver well on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now let me move on to Thanawat. Thailand, well, of course, my question is obviously on Thailand. Thailand has been quite successful in public-private partnership models. What can we learn from Thailand's experience?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and also for recognitions of our success, our experience, or even though for our mistake that we have made through
being humble.
public-private partnerships. As you know that we have, let's say, used the concept of public-private partnership in our agri-food system for decades. I can say that when we are talking about public-private partnership, there are some key elements that we need to take into account. The first one, how to build trust. Because you know that if we cannot build trust among all stakeholders, it's hard to work together. Because we know that when you're talking about policy, national policies or global policies, when we implement those policies and strategies at the country level, someone are winning in this game, and also some are losing. And that's why when we're talking about trust, we have to make sure that the policy that we are implementing at the country level really based on the mutual benefit of all sectors, of all stakeholders. And that's why we have to build the public-private partnerships in terms of through the mutual benefit, and also to make sure that we can keep balance of the interest of all people, of all sectors. And this one is the key success that we have done, and also we have learned through all our practice in Thailand. And for example, in Thailand, there are a lot of, we use this concept by establishing the National Board of Agricultural Commodities. For example, the rice board or rubber board, pig board, milk board, or poultry board. We bring all actors, private sectors, farmers associations, government agencies, and even others are stakeholders, consumers, to talk on the issues, to talk on the topic that they are interested in. And that's why I just would like to emphasize that if we want to have an achievement, we need to build trust, we need to keep balance all of our sectors, and also things that we are doing, that we are implementing, the policies at the country level have to be based on mutual benefit for all people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thanawat. I'm got my last, in the first round of questions. I'm now addressing my next question to Ishmael, obviously, as CEO of a farmer organization. And I know how combatant you have been supporting farmers organizations. How do you view a transformation innovation systems? What would you like to see on the agenda?
Thank you very much for giving me the platform to share some of my perspectives on transformation in innovation systems. I'll preface my remarks by observing that for something to be transformative, but it has to result in significant changes, positive changes in the quality of life of that person. So I think that is fundamental. We need to target research at those matters or those areas that result in significant changes at scale in the quality of lives. So to do that, I think we need to really look at what are the broader pain points that farmers are facing and target research at that. I think the first one really for me is one that is talking about the governance of value chains. As long as we don't have value chains that distribute value across the chain to the different actors in ways that are equitable and fair, it is never going to result in significant changes in farmers' lives. So let's direct research on how do we configure value chains such that they will be able to deliver more value to where most of the risk is lying, particularly the producer or primary side. That's the first point. The second point really is, given the limited availability of research resources, we really need to be strategic. And to be strategic, really, again, let's look at what are those things that will give us the best sort of payback. That also speaks to the issues that farmers are facing. One such area will be markets, for instance. Markets are fundamental to understand how markets configure themselves in such a way that they will produce fair results for farmers and fair rewards for farmers, including carbon markets. It could also be including data value chain markets. And also let's look at basic infrastructure, socio-economic infrastructure, policies, systems, and institutions. You will note that from my itemization here, I have not gone to the technical aspects. I'm looking at the systems, the policies. I think that's where innovation should lie much more. The last part really is to look at rewarding farmers for the innovations they do. Farmers are innovators in their own right. Unfortunately, their outputs are not recognized and rewarded, and they are not harvested. Their outputs speak directly to their issues, the practical needs, and are concrete. If we could work to harness those kind of outputs that are generated by the farmers themselves, that would take us a long way. Then finally, we really need to look at supporting farmers to do their innovation, rather than only focusing on innovating for farmers and then try to pass down the results of your innovation for the farmer to adopt. It should really be about supporting innovations that the farmers are practically grappling with and doing at the practical level. Thank you, over.
Kanayo, you have...
We have a second round of questions, but actually we have exhausted the time allocated to both questions. So I'm going to ask you to be as extremely brief as possible, because we have a session of Q&A, and we have the Q&A box is full with questions for you guys. I think that's going to be more exciting to have this interaction. So I'm going to go with the second round very quickly. First question to Thanawat. We have heard from Ishmael on what farmers would like to see. To deliver on this, we need actions not only at the country level, but also regional and global levels. Now, as chair of CFS, and noting Thailand's important role in regional coordination in the ASEAN region, what do you think needs to happen at the regional and global levels? Now we're going beyond Thailand.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. If you look at my bookshelves behind me, all of those books is about guidelines, policies. We can say that all the global policies, all the science at the global level are existing. But now we just need only action. That's why when you're talking about farmers, we're talking about people at the ground level, at the field level, at the national level. They don't know much about the global policies, but they really want the actual investment and also action at the ground level to make sure that we really can deliver. And also when you're talking about the regional coordinations, I can give you an example. One of the CFS policy recommendation, policy guideline on principle for responsible investment in agriculture and food system. This CFS guideline has been used, let's say, is a good example for regional coordination among the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, that they used the guideline of the CFS to be part of their, or they adopted to be part of the regional principles. And that's why we can, since I already mentioned, the global policies are available. Now, if we want to bring it to the regional or the national level, it just needs our action, and we need the action now. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you so much. Very quickly to Joe, number one. Innovation is a cross-cutting lever for change at the Food System Summit. How are you approaching the lever within your action track?
Thanks, Kanayo. I'll be very brief. To me, innovation is, let me qualify innovation first. To me, innovation is anything that is new and useful. It can be new things, or it can be new ways of doing the same things. But the most important point is that innovation needs to create value for everyone. So at the end of innovation process, everyone has to be better off when an innovation is introduced than they were before. Okay, in Action Track 3, we're looking at innovations that go beyond those that improve production technology alone. That is, how to produce more food with less resources. We want to move beyond that. We are also looking at solutions which will help us get out of systemic lock-ins, which prevent actions at scale for nature-positive food production systems. I'd like to bring two different examples here about what I think are innovative processes. One comes from Brazil and the other from India. In Brazil, there is this low carbon agricultural program, right? Among other technology, this program includes the biological fixation of nitrogen, no-till, and the integration of crops, livestock, and forestry in the same property, right? It is backed by unofficial credit systems. But one of the lock-ins that we have been perceiving is that for this to be resolved, we would need to de-risk credit to farmers so that more farmers can participate and reduce the bureaucracy to borrow from this credit line. But it's a really, really interesting program because we know how to do crops, we know how to do livestock, to raise livestock, and we know how to do forestry. But bringing all this together in one property, to me, is an innovation when it's backed by the appropriate credit and finance lines. The other example that I like to bring is the zero budget natural farming in India, which I visited a couple of years ago. This is a holistic alternative to the present paradigm of high cost chemical inputs based agriculture. It's very effective from what I saw in addressing uncertainties of climate change. And, you know, to me, it was really beautiful to recognize the role of the self-help groups, which brings the demonstrate the social and economic returns of gender inclusion. So the important thing is to when we talk about innovation is that we cannot compromise on solutions that deliver scale and urgency, and to keep focusing on finding solutions that bring nature and people together. Solutions to people and planet aren't meant to be separated. They are joint decisions. Let me stop here. Thank you, Kanayo.
Well, thanks a lot, Joe. Now, Joe, number two, IFAD. Innovations will only scale if there are incentives in place for farmers to adopt this. I think this you know very well, just like I do. Now, how is IFAD creating incentives for adopting innovations through the ASAP program?
Thank you very much. So for those who don't know the ASAP program, ASAP stands for Adaptation for Smallholder Agriculture Program. And ASAP has been a long-standing program with IFAD where we've gotten learning from for the past almost 9 years now. So there are two things that I want to highlight here. One, within ASAP, because it's a grant program, we are able to work with communities and with farmers to then try out new ways of delivering either nutrition or higher productivity through improved value chains. So, but ASAP, because it's a grant-based program, also lets us experiment with those. And then for those that turn out to be successful, these are scaled up through IFAD's overall program of loan, right? So it's a very nice sort of choreographed program where you can experiment at a smaller scale and then graduate those that have been successful. Within ASAP, we've tested a lot of innovations through highly rigorous impact assessments and impact evaluations that have used counterfactuals. So whether it is labor contracting societies in Bangladesh or water use associations in Ethiopia or matching grants in Rwanda. So that's on the production side. But then also on the storage side, because food loss is a very big concern for farmers, community storage banks, as well as other agroecological initiatives such as community-based forestry-based development, such as in Mexico, and other methods of cultivation, such as pasture rotation plants in Tajikistan. All of these have been tried and tested through impact evaluations and impact assessments. And so good agricultural practices in Mexico. And where these are seen to be successful, then the idea is to scale them up. My last example then is also precision-based agriculture. This has been tried across different sites and contexts within the ASAP program, and yields have been seen to increase from anywhere from 4 to 10%. Right, with adoption rates being very high. So I think it really showcases that once you do have a grant program that is looking in a very inclusive and participatory way at innovations at the farmers level, and then can use a very different part of the program and the overall work that IFAD is doing to scale these up, we then have a comprehensive approach to thinking about innovation and scaled up solutions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, my last question again goes to Ismail. I think, Ismail, you're supposed to be rounding up all these answers to this question. So now, Southern Africa has been a hotbed of innovation among farmers, especially using ICT in farming. Now, what should we be doing to support such innovation amongst farmers in the region?
Thank you once more for the question. And I have 4 items, essentially. The first one really is the establishment of an extensive network of digital infrastructure. If you're talking about ICT and innovation, and we're talking about impact at scale, you can't afford not to invest in where most of the farmers are, in the rural areas. So extensive network of digital network is important. And related to that would also be affordability and access to the necessary gadgets, as well as the cost of data. Because the network alone, without the other gadgets and the other costs related to it, would not be sufficient. Number 2 is really talking to the issue of digital literacy. We really need to do that at scale for people to understand how to use the digital infrastructure and the gadgets. Sometimes we take it for granted that people can do WhatsApp, can speak on the phone, and that's the end of the story. There's a lot more that can be harvested from using the current gadgets, so to speak. The third really is, to me, again, I keep on harping on about the same issue about digital systems can be used to facilitate transparency and openness in value sharing and value distribution and risk distribution, because it has traceability in it. How can we deploy digital technology to improve the accountability, governance of value chains, trace where the value and the risk is, and then reward accordingly? There might be some smarter people who can help us do that. Then the final point really is about, it's still a contested area as far as we are concerned, the issue of value from data. And we really need to ensure that we support the establishment of data infrastructure and related capabilities for farmers' organizations as they negotiate with other data value chain actors, because we consider data as a value chain in its own right. And if we don't negotiate fairly and squarely and have the capabilities to do that as representatives of farmers, it might actually undercut them in the negotiation process. Thank you so much for the opportunity once more.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you so much for the answers. Now we will move to our live audience Q&A, which unfortunately we have eaten into half of the time actually allocated to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have, at one point we had over 460 participants on this event, and we have close to 50 Q&A on the Q&A box. My colleagues have identified a couple of them, so I'm going to call on a couple of people, and please kindly ask your questions with a maximum of 30 seconds for each. The first question is from Molly Anderson. Molly Anderson, are you there? The next question I'm going to call upon Lee Rex. So please get yourself ready to ask your question. Is Molly?
Yes, I am here.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Could you ask your question?
Yes, there was an HLPE report published in 2019 on agroecological and other innovations in agriculture. And I am really baffled in this panel that agroecology seems to be taking a somewhat secondary place, because the benefits of agroecology compared with approaches like precision agriculture, climate smart agriculture, individual things like drought resistant varieties, they were very clearly shown in that report with an abundance of scientific evidence. So it seems obvious that we need this multifunctional agriculture that's looking at livelihoods, nutrition, environmental benefits, including carbon sequestration. And that doesn't seem to be getting sufficient emphasis in this particular panel.
Okay, whom are you asking? Whom are you addressing your question to, please? Any particular
I'm really
panel?
addressing it and excuse me, Kanayo, but I'm really addressing it to all of the panelists. I've been pleased with some of the responses that Joao has brought forward. Some of the examples he's brought forward are of true agroecological approaches, but we need overall.
Okay, I'm going to ask Rachel. I'm going to ask Rachel if she wants to say a few words to that question. Rachel, are you with us?
I am. Yeah, so look, I think there was actually part of my talk about the importance of integrating across and having responses that are both, but I skipped over it in the interest of time. So I think Molly, I think we both need, sometimes individual interventions can be extremely effective. And sometimes we need kind of the more holistic approach that you're talking about. I would say, in my looking at the evidence, I think we don't do enough to say when we need to do the whole holistic approaches, because those can be harder to implement sometimes. But clearly we need to have interventions that are good for farmers, as well as good for the environment. So we do need those two aspects together, because without that, farmers themselves won't respond. But I mean, the rest of the panel knows the evidence far better than me, so I don't know if any of the others want to.
Yeah, we'll give them an opportunity when they have their last 1 minute, if we have that 1 minute left. Let me go to the next question. Lee Rex, please, let's hear your question.
Hi, thank you so much. So I wanted to know, because it's clear that innovation is really a substantial part in addressing climate change, but it's also very important that we keep the farmers in the center and ensure that we do a transition that's also climate friendly, but also doesn't leave the farmers out. So what I wanted to ask was, what are the discussions about integrating just transition practices with innovative technologies likely to look at COP26 or at the UN Food System Summit? And where should we put our effort? Where should the efforts be made to develop multi-stakeholder coalitions or plug data gaps on innovation regarding the food industry, and specifically for me, the meat industry, which is a major contributor to climate change? Are you
directing this to any particular panelist, or it's open to all?
But for me, it's open to all.
I'll give Joe Puri the first opportunity to answer that. Joe?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Lee, for that question. So on building approaches that are also socially inclusive, whether these are community-based approaches or whether these are building participatory approaches with, say, indigenous people and their food systems, and then recognizing as to how we can incorporate them into a larger global effort to both make them visible as well as to make them used and make them part of value chains is something that IFAD is doing quite a lot. So we are working with, we specifically are working with the Indigenous Peoples Forum. So that's on one side, but we also have specialized initiatives that are focusing on marginalized populations and with a specialized focus on women and youth. But I think the bigger question that you're asking also is, how are we bringing this in our own initiatives that are linked to markets and to value chains? Because that's where you're going to see the scale effects. That's where you're going to see the impact on a larger scale. And I think that conversation really gets made at the intersection of recognizing how institutions, markets, and farmers and small scale producers come together in the same forum to then discuss this. And that, I think, is a common responsibility and a common good that we still need to work far more on than we have done till now.
Thank you very much. Thanawat, you want to take 30 seconds to add to that answer?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's no single solution fit all sides. And that's why when we are talking about agroecological and those approaches and others innovative approaches, we need to make sure that all the approaches it fit well with our farmers. And also that's why after CFS 47, we will start negotiation of the policy recommendation on agroecological and other innovative approach at CFS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much then. My next, I'm going to ask, call upon Florence Ego. You have a question. Are you with us, Florence? And yes, after that, after Florence, I'm going to call upon Robin Anderson. Robin, I think I've seen your name somewhere. Okay, let's go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I work presently with UN Habitat on urban-rural linkages and territorial development. I'm a bit surprised that cities haven't been mentioned. This is where more than half of the world's consumers are. That's where agriculture services are based, in particular in small and intermediate cities. They're essential to actually be accountable for territorial development. I was very happy to see Mrs. Puri asking about what do we need from research. I think we need research to join forces with local actors, civil societies, people working in the field, and we need practice-based evidence rather than evidence-based practice. I mean, we really need to start learning from what is going on at local level. And it may be also a consideration to start organizing that evidence by bioregions. Things that will work in the Sahel will not be the ones that will work in mountain areas, will not be the work that will work in Arctic areas. So I think we need to start collecting that local information, that local knowledge, and embark on joint action learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Florence, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the action tracks and the champions of the UN Food System Summit. And I think just what you spoke about, national and regional and, grant routing of information and so on. I think a lot of the groups, the action track leaders, the action tracks, the champions, the scientific committee, and so on, basically, and I think this is, if I take that 1 second, that the whole objective of the food systems, or the process rather of the food systems summit is basically to really do what you're doing. At least one of the goals. And I'm very happy to see that you posed this question. Okay, let me now move on to Robin. And I think after Robin, I have, so you can be ready if we have enough time. Felino, you're going to come next after Robin. Robin, you have the floor. And please let us know who you are directing your question to.
Excellent, sir. Thank you. It's been a fantastic panel, so it would be a pleasure to connect with all of their interventions. But a question in particular for Mr. Sunga, and hello, sir. It's a great pleasure to see you, is to ask a little bit about this question about what is the balance as you move into these situations where you have a context that you have people that you want to empower to farm better, and they have to work, as Florence said, in their local zones. And what's the right mix between valuing their local knowledge while still giving them access to technologies and systems that will work for them? And in that regard, I think one of the particular opportunities here is how do we focus on the outcomes that we want, which is farmers with decent livelihoods, with good mixed crops, with access to livestock, and making sure that they have an outcome that supports their land and the quality of their water. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ismail?
Thanks for the question. It's a tough one, but let me try and give it a go. I think the bottom line for me is that whatever value is being created should be created in such a way that it involves, we don't want to see the farmer as the beneficiary, as at the end of the pipeline. It needs to be done together. We are not necessarily saying farmers are wiser than researchers, not at all. But I'm basically saying there's a lot of merit in merging the two. One can learn from the other in the process of creating the value. But more fundamentally, the way I conceptualize it is this, that whatever value you are going to create, be it mixed cropping system, be it carbon farming, the basic point is that it has risks in creating it, and there's value that is being created. Value being jointly created, in as much as a risk should be jointly shared. But that goes beyond it. That it's not only about sharing. Sharing is still happening at the moment. It has to have a sense of equity and fairness in it. And we're not saying the farmer should take everything. Neither are we saying everyone should take everything. But those fundamental principles needs to be enshrined in the way that we do things. And local situation, regional situation, international situation, different crop, different livestock, different farming systems, but that value should underpin what we do.
Okay, very well. Thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, I cannot, I have to apologize to Felino because we are now running out of time. We're eating into the last closing remarks by our colleague Kundavi. So I'm going to ask my panelists if they have any very pressing contribution they want to make for 30 seconds before we move on to Kundavi. You could actually, if you wish to add some more information to Florence's question, please do so. 30 seconds. We'll start with Thanawat.
Okay, all policies are existing, but now we need you to take an action, and the action should be taken now. Thank you very much.
All right, Joe, number one.
Yeah, my last remarks, I think it would be that when we talk about innovation, innovation does not necessarily need to be something out there that was just launched so that we can buy or begin to adopt. You know, we ourselves can establish, I think, a higher level of agency and innovate on our behaviors, innovate on our thinking, innovate on our mindsets. And just by asking two questions, you know, each time we eat, where does my food come from? And was it produced sustainably? Most of the times, no one will have answers to these questions. So this is something for us to begin to start paying attention to. This would be my last point. Thank you very much.
Before Ismail makes his 30 minutes comment, Joe, when you make your 30 minutes, please, could you answer Felino's question, which is how can international development organizations help LDCs to adopt the science-based risk transfer sharing mechanisms to address climate variability? That's for Joe. Sorry. Yeah, Ismail, your last comments.
Oh.
No, Joe, you're going to come last. Ismail. All right, Joe, please go ahead.
Sorry, difficulties and meeting. My last comment really is I like the way it was put earlier on that let's have also practice-based evidence and not evidence-based practice. I think it speaks to the point that let's look at how we credit the outputs for research. either it is too much in terms of academic publications and less on what it has been in terms of impacting on the farmers that the research is directed at. So how do we measure? How does one get successful in researching beyond a publication that is recognized academically? And how does it make sense, I think, is a key element of how to measure the output of research, whether it makes changes in people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last comments from Joe in response to Felino's question.
Yeah, there was a.
Oh, sorry. Which Joe did you mean, Chair?
You, Joe Puri.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in response to the question that was asked, especially for LDCs, we completely recognize that it's really difficult given all of the challenges of asymmetric markets, of credit, of capital markets, and not being able to access them, which is why, for example, IFAD has this grant program, which is Adaptation for Smallholder Farmers program, which is exactly to deal with these kind of challenges and obstacles which are really targeted at the last mile to take away and to mitigate a lot of these challenges. In the face of climate change and in the face of increased variability and therefore also increased uncertainty, we are realizing that overcoming that requires building greater reassurance for farmers and for small scale producers. And this is being done also by thinking far more about implementation approaches, last mile approaches, and behavioral science. And this brings me to my 30-second last wrap up.
Oh, now you are cheating. Go ahead.
Okay, but my last point is, I think we have to focus much more on the how, Chair, and rather than the what. And I think it speaks also to the question that was asked. And I think research and evidence have to go boldly into that space because they haven't done that sufficiently. Thanks, and over.
Thank you very much. Now, with due apologies to everyone, particularly to my boss, friend, Kundavi. We're now going to move over to the closing remarks, statements, next steps by our next speaker.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Again, distinguished speakers, panel members, and participants. The last 1 hour was such a fascinating perspectives that we heard from the panel as well as the speakers. And it actually brings it real that we are living in extraordinary times. Few challenges threaten our future well-being as well as collective survival more than anything that the climate crisis and its consequences for food systems. Now, combined with that, we also see the long-term damage caused by the pandemic. Therefore, the need for systemic change has never been more urgent. So all these interesting practical pointers that we heard from the speakers addresses really the triple challenge of climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, and food insecurity. Therefore, to bring this transformation, putting the focus on research and innovation systems in this discussion was quite important. As Rachel Glenister said, research and innovation in agriculture is the basis for the changes we urgently need. It can bring about benefits across sectors as well as high returns. So what can we do? It's not only just about innovation and scaling up, which we heard from many of the speakers, but also investments in the right places and public policies and incentives to make this happen. This again came through many of the speakers' perspectives as well. In 2021, a milestone year for food systems and climate action, CGIAR is rising to the challenge. As Kanaya already pointed out, our 2030 new research and innovation strategy responds to this call for an end-to-end approach with a focus on better partnerships and scalable solutions. And in all of that, in our strategy, climate change is at the heart of our roadmap for the next decade. Our experience over the last 50 years has demonstrated that through research and technology, we can bring about a tenfold return on investment and primarily benefiting smallholder farmers. And looking forward, we are also focusing on these end user beneficiaries, and along with partnership and collaboration. As Ismail Sunga noted, farmers are an important source of innovation and agents of transformation. We will work with farmers, we'll work with the private sector, with governments, with funders, and with others to enable the successful development and scaling up of solutions. And there are some very game-changing initiatives that are already underway. You have already heard about the 2-degree initiative, which was launched last year. It brings together partner organizations from all over the world with the united vision of transforming the global food systems, with the whole goal of positive outcome to climate, for food security and nature. And that's the kind of programs that we should be doing many more. And the goal of this coalition is to reach close to 200 million small-scale farmers by 2030. So let's be very ambitious. Another new example that I'd really like to share is this new $60 million grant from the World Bank that CGIAR is working on the climate adaptation research and capacity building activities in Africa. And this new initiative, accelerating the impact of CGIAR climate research for Africa, aims to strengthen the resilience of rural household. The kind of examples we heard from our panelists, that helps to increase the incomes and food security through enhanced access to climate information services and climate smart technologies. And we are very pleased that these activities, although concentrated in 6 African countries through knowledge sharing and technologies transfer, will benefit actually across the continent as well. CGIAR is also transforming institutionally into a more integrated one CGIAR. We want to bring all the capacities of the various research centers together to deploy scientific innovations faster, on a larger scale, and at a reduced cost. And that's what we mean by the one CG, to be able to transform the food systems. And I'd like to sort of also be really bring a sense of urgency. And that's what we heard from many of our speakers. Without additional science-based action and to align agriculture and climate targets, there is also the real possibility that a number of people will go hungry or are already facing malnutrition around the world. And this could exceed more than 840 million by 2030. So there is the sense of urgency for us to act. And if we take this further, and without the investments in innovation that are needed by 2050, more than 200 million people could be left displaced by climate-related disasters. So there is a sense of urgency for all of us to act. This is why in CGIAR, we will be doubling up our funding in agriculture research and innovation, but more than anything else, the partnership that we heard from many speakers today. It's not each of us can do on our own, but something that we need to do things together. And we are very pleased that among the many participants here and partners here together with UK, with Thailand, with the Rome-based agencies and all other current and future climate champions in this audience, we all need to join hands. I want to close by encouraging our audience to pledge action to transform innovation in our food systems through increasing investment in research and innovation that provide solutions that support SDGs on climate, nature, and food. Let's also look at sharing new business and partnership models that facilitate the scaling up of this innovation. So it's not only just about increasing investment, but also in scaling up. And then sharing knowledge on evidence-based approaches that support this transformation. Like we heard, farmers have a lot to offer. And as was said, practices-based evidence is also something that we need to take very careful look at, working closely with the farmers who are bringing about a lot more source of innovation and agents of transformation. So together, we can make the transformation of innovation systems and ultimately of food, land, and water systems a reality. And I thank you very much that we are here today to bring that combined effort, to bring about that transformation that we all want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you extremely. Thank you very much, Kundavi. I think you rounded up everything. That was actually an appropriate closing remarks. So I will just end up by thanking our panelists, our two speakers, initial speakers, our panelists, and also the audience. At one point, as I said, we had over 450 participants and 50 questions. And of course, we didn't provide you with 50 answers, but we had to be selective, and I thank you very much. And I'm sure our supporters and organizers at the back in the background will respond to your questions one way or the other and have access to a link that will provide you either by video or audio recording of this session. Once again, thank you all very much. We have started the year in the right footing, and I think we can see some exciting things going forward as we approach the United Nations Food System Summit and COP26. Thank you all and have a good day for those of you who are still have daylight. Thank you so much, dear panelists, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye, thank you.